There is a version of strength that never raises its voice, a form of dominance that does not threaten, explain, or beg to be understood. It simply exists. Toxic people, manipulators, instigators, emotional predators are conditioned to hunt reactions. They feed on disruption. They survive on chaos. And most people unknowingly give them exactly what they want: emotion, attention, explanation, resistance. But history teaches us something different. Niccolò Machiavelli observed that power is rarely seized through force alone. It is preserved through perception. In The Prince, he warns that the greatest rulers are not the loudest, but the most controlled. The ones who master themselves before attempting to master others. Sun Tzu echoes this in The Art of War. He who is prudent and lies in wait for an enemy who is not, sees will be victorious. And in Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight, we see the clearest modern metaphor. Chaos thrives on reaction. The Joker does not need strength, he needs response. Batman's power lies in restraint. This script is about 8 silent behaviors, not loud tactics, not threats, not posturing, but internal positions that signal unmistakably you are not to be messed with, not because you are aggressive, but because you are ungovernable. This is not about becoming cold. It is about becoming centered. This is not about domination. It is about sovereignty. Myles Munroe taught that leadership begins when a person governs themselves so well that others feel it without instruction. True authority does not announce itself. It radiates. And toxic people? They can sense when their usual tools no longer work. That is when they retreat. Why silence terrifies. Toxic people. Toxic individuals rely on predictability. They study patterns, how you react, when you explain, where you soften, when you chase approval. Robert Greene explains this clearly in the 48 Laws of Power. The greatest mistake you can make is to reveal your intentions. Reaction reveals intention. Emotion reveals leverage. Explanation reveals insecurity. Silence, on the other hand, reveals nothing. And that is why it is dangerous to those who seek control. Silence forces projection. Silence creates uncertainty. Silence removes the battlefield entirely. Machiavelli wrote in Discourses on Livy that republics fall not from external attack, but from internal disorder, unchecked emotion, impulsive decisions, and the inability to remain composed under pressure. The same is true in personal power. If someone can pull you into emotional reaction, they have already won. If someone can make you explain yourself, you have already stepped onto their terrain. So before we explore all 8 silent behaviors, we begin with the foundation, the behavior upon which all others rest. Silent behavior. Don't react emotionally. This is the master key. Emotional reaction is the most exploited weakness in human interaction. It is not accidental. Toxic people are experts at provoking it. They criticize just enough. They disrespect subtly. They test boundaries lightly. Not to defeat you, but to see where you break. Sun Tzu teaches that if you know yourself and know your enemy, you need not fear the outcome of 100 battles. Emotional reaction tells the enemy exactly who you are in real time. When you react emotionally, or you surrender 3 things immediately. Frame control. You are now responding, not leading predictability. You reveal your triggers. Authority. You signal that external behavior governs your internal state. Machiavelli warned rulers never to appear ruled by passion. Not because emotion is weakness, but because visible emotion is leverage. Toxic people do not need to overpower you physically or intellectually. They only need to disturb your emotional center. And once they do, they begin writing the script. Calm is not passive, it is strategic. There is a misconception that emotional neutrality equals weakness. This belief is dangerous. In The Art of War, Sun Tzu does not praise rage. He praises composure. In The Dark Knight, Batman does not win because he is stronger than chaos, but because he refuses to become it. Calm is not the absence of power. Calm is contained power. When you do not react emotionally, insults lose momentum, manipulation collapses, provocations expire, because emotional hooks require engagement to stay alive. Robert Greene frames this as Law 36. Disdain things you cannot have. Ignoring them is the best revenge. Not reacting emotionally is not suppression. It is selective engagement. You are not denying emotion. You are refusing to make it public currency. What toxic people expect, and what shocks them. Toxic people expect escalation. They expect defense. They expect justification. They depend on it. So when they provoke and receive nothing, no anger, no explanation, no visible irritation, it destabilizes them. Your silence becomes a mirror. And many people cannot stand what they see when there is no reaction to distract them. Machiavelli understood this psychological imbalance well. In Florentine histories, he documented how leaders who remained unshaken during insult often gained silent allegiance, not because they fought back, but because they appeared unmovable. Calm strength suggests depth. Depth suggests calculation. Calculation suggests danger. How to practice emotional non-reactivity. This is not about becoming numb. It is about building delay between stimulus and response. Here are 3 principles to internalize. 1. Pause is power. A pause is not hesitation. It is dominance. It signals that you decide when the moment moves forward. 2. Observe before you interpret. Most reactions come from assumption, not fact. Observation restores clarity. 3. Respond. Only when it serves you not. Every comment deserves access to your nervous system. Myles Munroe taught that maturity is measured by how little external chaos can disrupt internal order. Emotional mastery is leadership of the self, and when you lead yourself well, others adjust automatically. The aura of someone who doesn't react. People who don't react emotionally develop a presence that cannot be taught verbally. Their stillness unsettles others. Their restraint creates gravity. Their composure commands respect without asking for it. Toxic people avoid them, not because they are feared, but because they are uncontrollable. You cannot manipulate someone who does not react. You cannot bait someone who does not chase. You cannot dominate someone who governs themselves. This is why calm strength is the first silent behavior. Without it, the others collapse. The next behaviors build on this foundation. Setting boundaries without explaining, walking away without drama, remaining mysterious, refusing validation games, disengaging from manipulation, prioritizing peace, forgiving without reopening access. But none of them work if emotional reaction still owns you. So before you try to be respected, before you try to be untouchable, before you try to command presence, you must master stillness under pressure. That is where real power begins. If this message resonates, if you're ready to move differently, think strategically, and protect your energy, subscribe to the channel. What's coming next will show you how to establish boundaries, command respect, and exit toxic dynamics without saying a word. What is coming next will take this foundation and turn it into an unmistakable presence. The power is not proven by how long you stay. It is proven by how easily you can leave. Once emotional reactivity is mastered, a new question emerges. Who has access to you, and on what terms? Toxic people are not dangerous because they are strong. They are dangerous because they are persistent. They push, probe, linger, and test until resistance weakens. Machiavelli warned rulers that disorder enters not through violence, but through tolerated intrusion. In Discourses on Livy, he argued that unchecked familiarity erodes authority faster than rebellion. Robert Greene sharpened this idea centuries later. The more you say, the more likely you are to say something foolish. Silence does not merely protect you, it defines you. In this batch, we move from internal control to external positioning, not through confrontation, not through explanation, but through three behaviors that signal unmistakably access to you is earned, not assumed. 2. Silent behavior. Set boundaries. Without explaining, explanation is the drug-toxic people crave. They provoke not just to cross boundaries, but to force you to justify them. Once you explain, the boundary becomes negotiable. Once it becomes negotiable, it is no longer a boundary. It is a suggestion. Machiavelli was explicit about this. Authority weakens when leaders feel compelled to defend every decision. In The Prince, he advises rulers to act decisively and allow results, not explanations, to justify them. Boundaries lose power when they come with apologies. They collapse when wrapped in emotional narratives. They dissolve when over-clarified. A boundary stated once, calmly, without justification, then does three things. It establishes finality. It denies manipulation hooks. It tests respect immediately. Toxic people do not fear boundaries. They fear non-negotiable ones. Why explanation signals vulnerability? Explanation reveals two things. You want approval. You fear misinterpretation. Both are leverage points. Robert Greene explains this through Law 4. Always say less than necessary. When you explain your boundary, you invite debate. When you debate, you invite control. When you allow control, you forfeit power. Consider how leaders operate. They do not justify policies to appease every critic. They announce direction and move forward. Myles Munroe taught that leadership is not democratic at the level of vision. Vision is declared, not debated. The same applies to your personal boundaries, when what a silent boundary looks like. A silent boundary is not cold. It is clean. It sounds like, I'm not available for that. That doesn't work for me. I won't be engaging in this. No tone, no explanation, no emotional residue. Toxic people may push harder afterward, not because the boundary failed, but because they are testing whether it is real. Hold it once, repeat it once if necessary. Then disengage. Consistency, not intensity, is what makes boundaries immovable. 3. Silent behavior. Walk away without drama. Nothing destabilizes a toxic person more than an exit without spectacle. They expect confrontation. They expect closure. They expect emotional negotiation. They do not expect absence. Sun Tzu taught that the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. Walking away without drama removes the battlefield entirely. Machiavelli observed that withdrawal, when done strategically, often preserves strength more effectively than engagement. In Florentine histories, he documented leaders who survived not by winning every conflict, but by choosing which conflicts never deserved their presence. Walking away silently communicates three things. You are not invested in proving anything. You do not fear misunderstanding. You value peace over dominance. That combination is deeply unsettling to manipulators. Why drama is a trap. Drama is fuel. It gives toxic people attention, narrative control, emotional payoff. Even negative attention validates their influence. Robert Greene warns that enemies often want to provoke you into public reaction because it lowers you to their level and exposes your emotional hand. When you walk away quietly, you deny them the story. No explanation, no final message, no emotional punctuation, just disengagement. And in silence, power shifts. The discipline of the unannounced exit. Most people stay too long because they believe leaving requires justification. It doesn't. Leaving without drama is not avoidance. It is selection. You are selecting peace. You are selecting clarity. You are selecting self-respect. Myles Munroe taught that you cannot lead effectively while being emotionally enslaved to environments that drain you. Departure is sometimes the highest form of leadership. The key is how you leave, not slamming doors, not announcing betrayal, not delivering speeches, just absence. And absence speaks louder than arguments ever could. 4. Silent behavior. Stay mysterious. Predictability is vulnerability. The more people know about you, your motives, your next move, your emotional patterns, the easier you are to manipulate. Machiavelli advised rulers to reveal intentions only when necessary. In The Prince, he emphasized that appearance is often more influential than truth. Mystery protects authority. Robert Greene dedicates entire sections of the 48 Laws of Power to the strategic advantage of opacity. What is unknown cannot be controlled. Toxic people rely on familiarity. They exploit repetition. They weaponize what you reveal. Mystery denies them all three. Mystery is not deception. Staying mysterious does not mean lying. It means withholding. When you do not narrate your struggles, you do not announce your plans, you do not explain your silence. Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight illustrates this brilliantly. Batman's power lies not in transparency, but in uncertainty. No one knows where he is, what he feels, or what he will do next. That uncertainty creates hesitation. Hesitation creates respect. What mystery signals psychologically? When you remain reserved, people project depth onto you. Assumptions replace certainty. Caution replaces entitlement. Toxic people dislike mystery because it removes control. They cannot predict your reactions, your limits, or your tolerance. And unpredictability, when paired with calmness, reads as dangerous intelligence. Sun Tzu would call this concealed strength. Machiavelli would call it prudent distance. Greene would call it power. How to cultivate mystery. You don't need to perform mystery. You simply need to stop oversharing. Speak less than expected. Reveal results, not process. Let silence answer questions. People will fill the gaps themselves, and often assume more strength than you ever claimed. Mystery does not isolate you. It positions you. If these ideas are challenging how you move, think, and interact, drop your thoughts in the comments. Which of these behaviors feels hardest to apply right now? And which one do you feel could change everything? Next, we will move deeper into disengagement, validation refusal, and energy protection. At a certain level of self-mastery, you stop asking, "How do I win this interaction?" And you start asking, "Why is this interaction happening at all?" This is the turning point. Machiavelli understood that power matures when it no longer reacts to every challenge. In the Discourses on Livy, he noted that strong states decline when they exhaust themselves responding to every provocation instead of governing their inner order. The same principle applies to personal power. Toxic people want engagement. They want friction. They want relevance. Your next silent behaviors remove all three. 5. Silent behavior. Don't chase validation. Validation is a leash disguised as approval. The moment you need recognition, agreement, or praise from someone, especially someone unstable, you have handed them influence. Robert Greene makes this brutally clear throughout the 48 Laws of Power. The need to be liked is a strategic weakness. Those who require affirmation can be steered, delayed, or humiliated. Toxic people sense validation hunger immediately. They withhold praise. They move the goalposts. They offer crumbs. And many people chase those crumbs without realizing the cost. Why validation seeking destroys. Authority comes from self-containment. When your sense of worth depends on external response, you explain too much. You tolerate disrespect. You negotiate self-respect. Myles Munroe taught that purpose-driven people do not seek permission to exist. They operate from assignment, not applause. When you know who you are, validation becomes optional, and optional things do not control you. What happens when you stop chasing? When you no longer seek validation, praise no longer inflates you. Criticism no longer destabilizes you. Silence no longer scares you. Toxic people become confused. They rely on emotional hooks, not grounded identities. When their approval means nothing, their leverage evaporates. You don't announce this shift. You don't explain it. You simply stop reaching. And in that withdrawal, power consolidates. 6. Silent behavior. Don't engage in their games. Every toxic interaction is a game. The rules are unspoken, the objectives are hidden, and the payoff is emotional dominance. They bait, test, triangulate, and provoke, not to resolve anything, but to maintain control. Sun Tzu warned that fighting on terrain chosen by the enemy guarantees disadvantage. Toxic people are masters at choosing terrain, emotional confusion, urgency, and false dilemmas. Engaging is agreeing to play, and the games thrive on reaction. Toxic games include passive aggression, manufactured urgency, guilt-framing emotional traps. They are designed to force a response, not a solution. Machiavelli advised leaders to recognize when opposition seeks chaos rather than outcome. In such cases, engagement strengthens the opponent. Silence weakens them. Refusal is the ultimate disruption. You don't counter their moves. You don't expose the game. You don't demand fairness. You simply don't play. No defense, no correction, no participation. This is not weakness. It is strategic denial. Robert Greene would call this controlling the field by leaving it. You cannot lose a game you refuse to acknowledge. Toxic people escalate briefly when ignored. Then they collapse. Because games require players. The calm confidence of non-participation. When you disengage from games, your energy returns to you. You stop rehearsing conversations. You stop explaining yourself internally. You stop reliving interactions. Peace replaces vigilance, and that peace becomes visible. People sense when someone is no longer accessible to nonsense. 7. Silent behavior. Prioritize peace over people. This is where true separation happens. Most people sacrifice peace to preserve connection. Powerful people sacrifice connection to preserve peace. Myles Munroe taught that you cannot lead effectively while emotionally fragmented. Peace is not comfort. It is clarity. Toxic people disrupt peace because peace exposes them. Chaos hides insecurity. Drama masks emptiness. When you prioritize peace, now you make a silent declaration. No one gets access at the cost of my stability. Why peace is a power move. Peace signals emotional independence, internal alignment, clear priorities. Machiavelli understood that stable rule depended on order, not constant appeasement. Leaders who chased popularity lost authority. Those who protected the structure endured. Protecting peace is protecting structure. What changes when peace comes first? You begin to say no without guilt, leave without explanation, detach without resentment. Your nervous system recalibrates. You stop being reactive. You stop being available to chaos. You stop being drained. Toxic people either adjust or disappear. Both outcomes are wins. Peace is not isolation. Choosing peace does not mean loneliness. It means selectivity. You become precise about who enters your world. Not everyone deserves proximity. Not everyone earns access. Not everyone belongs in your inner circle. And that discernment is not cruelty, it is wisdom. Sun Tzu would call this choosing favorable ground. Machiavelli would call it prudent governance. Munroe would call it maturity. The identity shift. By this point, something has changed. You are no longer trying to prove strength. You are embodying it. Your silence has weight. Your absence has meaning. Your calm has authority. Toxic people sense this shift long before you say anything, and most will retreat without confrontation. If this message sharpened your perspective, subscribe, like, and share this video with someone who needs to reclaim their calm, their boundaries, and their power. The next phase will complete the cycle with the final silent behavior, the one that seals your freedom permanently. At the highest level of personal power, something subtle happens. You stop managing people. You stop monitoring threats. You stop calculating responses, not because danger disappears, but because you do. You are no longer emotionally present where manipulation lives. Machiavelli understood this evolution well. In The Prince and later in Discourses on Livy, he described the difference between rulers who survive and those who endure. Survivors remain reactive. Endurers become self-contained systems. This final silent behavior is not the loudest. It is not the most dramatic. But it is the one that permanently removes toxic people from your inner world. Calm. Silent behavior. Forgive, but don't return. Forgiveness is often misunderstood. Many people think forgiveness means reconciliation, access, re-entry. It does not. Forgiveness is internal release, not external invitation. Toxic people weaponize forgiveness by pressuring you to move on while changing nothing. They confuse healing with proximity. Machiavelli warned against this exact mistake. Mercy without structure leads to disorder. In leadership and in life, compassion must be paired with distance. You can forgive someone and still refuse to reopen the door. That is not bitterness. That is discernment. Why forgiveness without return is power. Holding resentment keeps you emotionally tied to the past. Returning keeps you exposed to repeat harm. For forgiving without returning does something radical. It frees your nervous system. It ends the emotional loop. It restores internal authority. Sun Tzu taught that victory is not destroying the enemy, but rendering them irrelevant. Forgiveness without access achieves exactly that. Toxic people lose interest when they no longer occupy your emotional landscape. They cannot manipulate someone who is at peace. The difference between healing and access. Healing happens in silence. Access happens by permission. You do not owe continued presence to anyone who violated your boundaries. Myles Munroe taught that forgiveness restores you, not the relationship. Re-entry requires accountability, change, consistency. Without those, forgiveness remains internal. This is where many people lose power. They confuse kindness with obligation. Kindness is optional. Access is earned. What forgiveness looks like in practice. Forgiveness is not a message. It is not a conversation. It is not an announcement. It is the quiet decision to stop carrying weight that was never yours. You stop revisiting old wounds. You stop replaying arguments. You stop explaining why you left. And most importantly, you do not return to environments that required you to shrink. The integration. Becoming untouchable without force. At this point, all 8 silent behaviors merge into a single presence. Let's revisit them, not as actions, but as identity. You don't react emotionally because your center is stable. You set boundaries without explaining because your self-respect is settled. You walk away without drama because peace matters more than ego. You stay mysterious because overexposure is unnecessary. You don't chase validation because your worth is internal. You don't engage in games because you choose your terrain. You prioritize peace over people because clarity outranks attachment. You forgive without returning because freedom is the goal. This is not detachment born of fear. This is detachment born of mastery. What changes in how people treat you? When you embody these behaviors consistently, and something inevitable happens. Manipulators disengage. Drama bypasses you. Respect replaces testing. Not because you demanded it, but because your energy no longer invites nonsense. Robert Greene would describe this as occupying a higher strategic altitude. Those below cannot reach you without climbing, and most will not try. You are no longer reactive material. The Batman Principle, order without noise. Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight gives us the perfect modern symbol. Batman does not explain himself. He does not chase approval. He does not engage chaos on chaos's terms. He appears when necessary, disappears when done, and leaves behind order, not applause. That is the archetype you are stepping into. Not savior, not villain, but force of stability. Why toxic people fear this version of you? Toxic people need access. They need reaction. They need emotional participation. This version of you offers none. You are calm, but not passive. Kind, but not open-ended. Forgiving, but not forgetful. That combination is impenetrable. Machiavelli would call it prudent strength. Sun Tzu would call it invincibility without battle. Myles Munroe would call it leadership of the self. You are not required to explain your boundaries, justify your peace, perform your healing, prove your strength. Your life is not a courtroom. Your silence does not need defense. Power is quiet when it is real. There is a crown that does not glitter, a throne that no one sees, a strength that does not announce itself. It belongs to those who mastered themselves before trying to manage others. You do not need to intimidate. You do not need to dominate. You do not need to be understood. Your calm is enough. Your absence is enough. Your peace is enough. And toxic people will know, without a single word, that you are not to be messed with.